I've been on many selection committees where we're looking for board members. So I'm trying to think about how to articulate what somebody would be looking for.
Okay.
So I think you really want to find somebody who has strategic thinking, a strategic mind. So one of the dynamics that happens often is that you'll find people applying to be on the board, but when you speak to them, you find that they're very inward facing or very technical. Nine.
CTA with Dr. Laila, video 9.
The conversation continues. We did a small break right now, stretched our legs a bit, added some more calories. He's always dissing me. He's like, Richie, your buttons are screaming. I love it. But I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. I think this is such a powerful CTA. Normally we do the playhouse where you get to hear the story of the life guest, and then we do something called class and session where we pick a certain topic, and for 2 hours we have insightful conversations about that. This feels like a mix of both. As you're sharing your life journey, you're stopping to do and give us nuggets about different things. The last thing that you made us ponder on, that was good. If you haven't watched, go back and watch the last episode and the previous ones. Let's continue. Where we left this story off, you guys are brokering a peace deal. Basically, you're asking two different parties to come together and unite for the sake of, I don't want to say for business, but for the sake of the country. Yeah. So let's continue.
Yeah, so that was quite a process. And I think I was talking about that in the context of business, where I was saying that whole experience around that time really taught me about the downside. And really being able to think from the beginning about it's not always what you make, it's always also about what you keep.
Wow.
And so this reminds me of a book that I'm very fond of, which is one of those tough love books. You know, I love tough love when people tell you like it is and they try to make you better. So this book is called The Road Less Stupid.
The Road Less Stupid.
Stupid, yes.
Oh,
and
nice.
It's by a man called Cunningham. And it's actually advice from the chairman of the board. So somebody very experienced who has gone before you. And what this book really talks about is how much money would you have if you erased all the big mistakes you've made with money? Like how much money would you have today if you looked back and said, this bad decision I made and that bad decision I made, and erased them, we'd be much further ahead. And so he uses that now to start going into the kinds of mistakes and judgment calls. And sometimes it's a split-second judgment call. Sometimes it's because you're acting from emotion.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's because you're feeling a lot of pressure to keep up with the Joneses. There's all kinds of things that make you make bad decisions and lose a lot of what you've made. So I think for entrepreneurs, founders, investors of all kinds, it's a very important book and thing to look at, because what that whole episode of post-election violence showed me is that we had leverage to buy land. We had brought in investors, and everything was on the bet that everything would go well, even for an election. So it was nobody's fault that it didn't work out. But then after that, it took me 3 years to kind of disentangle from that experience and that transaction, which I did. I paid all my investors. I was very committed to that. But for that particular case, going forward, I've always been very, very clear about what is the bottom line, how do we hedge our bets, and there's sometimes it's okay to do something, to do nothing. There's sometimes when people think, because I'm an investor, I always have to be moving, but sometimes it's an investment decision to wait out, to preserve capital before you get back into the game when circumstances have changed. All of these things are very important to have in your skill set, so you're not always the kind of person who has one arrow in your quiver, which means I only know how to do one kind of thing. I'm a one-trick pony kind of thing. Instead, you should have a broad idea of different things to do in different circumstances as an investor. So that's one way to think about loss and gain, especially in an environment like ours, which can be quite tumultuous sometimes.
Okay, so from a career perspective, what happens after that 2008 up and down, call it? I mean, after now with KEPSA, you guys get Kofi Annan. There's sort of the deal is brokered.
The country's back on the right track.
Yes.
Well, healing from that episode.
Yes.
What was outcome of that, of course, was the work, because the next 2 years then we're working towards the new constitution. And that was a lot of work within KEPSA and outside, where we would be negotiating with different parties, trying to find consensus positions around some of these issues. For our part, a lot of it was the land chapter for the Land Sector Board and KPDA. So making sure we really have a balance between the three things that affect land, right? So on one hand is the economy. You want people to be prosperous. You want people to exploit the land. At the same time, you're thinking about equity, especially in a context where we have a lot of historical injustices as they came into the Constitution. And then the last bit is sustainability and environment. And all of those have to be balanced because we want all, but we also want to make sure that nobody's left terribly disadvantaged. So it's the same thing of risk allocation, giving and taking. And it was quite a process. And even in that, we also had a dynamic where there were also some international partners who were getting involved and all of this. So we had to be very balanced and make sure at the end of the day that the voice of the people is what prevailed and that we came out with a constitution that we felt had taken care of some of our biggest concerns as citizens.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of players in the forming of the new constitution, huh?
Yes. So after that post-election violence, there was a number of things that you remember Agenda 4 that said we have to take, because I guess as the deal was being brokered, the question was, what are the long-standing issues that have driven this conflict? Because it wasn't about just this election.
It's true.
The election was just a trigger.
Yep.
So then we listed those issues and we said we're going to have a process going forward now where we're going to be addressing each of those issues. And that's what culminated in the Constitution in the end. But working on those things, how do you deal with historical injustices if it's around land? How do you deal with this conflict that left a community affected? And kind of bring it to a point where people feel there's a process that's acknowledging, the dispossession or the pain of that episode in their community's history. All of this had to be done. So I spent the next few years working on that.
But are you working on it as a job? Like
No. This was all volunteer work. This was serving the nation. Everybody, yes.
So
everyone except the KEPSA Secretariat is volunteering. And this means like mornings at 7 a.m. you're at breakfast or you're having meetings, really trying to work out these issues, committee meetings, negotiations. All of this is service. It's a volunteer role.
Wow. And then, so from a business perspective, are you still running your business?
Yes, you're still running your business as all of this is happening. So in this particular case, it was that transaction, making sure that everybody's made whole, that we come up with a workaround that keeps everybody feeling that they've gotten their capital back and a return, which we succeeded to do, but it took some doing.
I have a question.
Yes.
When it comes to investing, where is the risk? Where is this feeling that I took a risk, the risk didn't work out, so you have to still pay me back?
Oh, yes.
Do you get what I mean?
I know where you're going with this.
I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, so I explained earlier.
It wasn't my fault that the country decided to go into war. You've lost your money. Sorry.
That's true. I think we need to mature a bit on this. The idea that risk comes with return. So if you take more risk as an equity investor, you expect more of a return, but there's still risk, right? So what happens is that even in the documentations of the prospectus and everything, people do sign and they say, I understand I could lose everything, this is an investment. But when the fact materializes, if it's a transaction of some kind, you'll find some people still, even if they understand that it was a force majeure, something outside your anybody's control or anything you were able to predict, there's still some people who come back and say, so-and-so lost my money. So sometimes when I see some of these, scandals in the newspaper or something, I always look to try and take a more sophisticated view. Was it something where somebody actually ran away with the money? Or was it something that had to do with the inherent risks, market risks, and other risks of an investment? So I do think we do need to educate the market so that they understand what an equity investment is, vis-a-vis, for example, lending somebody money. If you lend somebody money, you get a smaller return, but they have a higher obligation to pay you back. There's still things that can happen that make them unable to pay you. And usually there's a clause that covers that. But at the end of the day, it's very different from an investor where you say, it's true. I mean, I'm targeting this return, but it's possible that I might not get it at all. Yeah. Okay.
So, but in the West, is this known? Is this understood? Or is the same principle?
No. I think it's a bit different. I think here the market is still, a lot of people are learning and understanding, but I still think that there's more of a dynamic. And there's a dynamic everywhere where once people have lost their money, they do try and get it back, right? Even if they're trying to say they didn't understand or something like that. But I think here, people personalize it much more.
Okay.
Now, on the flip side of this, none of us want to operate in a world where you've lost investors' money, right? So you'll find that most people who receive investor money, founders or investment companies, will do almost anything not to lose the money, right? It's something that very few people have tolerance for, because your reputation is on the line, and people have given you their hard-earned money. You want to make sure they get it back, especially if it's a listed company and you have small investors who have really, given you their life savings. It's something that it just comes with the DNA of investment companies to make sure that you get to the other side of people's money.
I get it. I just wanted to understand it from your perspective. So what's next? Where do we go to? Elections are happening. I mean, elections have happened. You've at least been able to pay people back. I think you said the principal.
No, with a return. With a return. Yes, wow. Yes. Actually, quite a good return. Not like what it would have been if it was beyond fixed deposit. Okay. But I wasn't able to give the return I had really hoped for. Okay. Very juicy.
That would have set you up for the next one.
Yeah, to take care of them. Yeah. Okay. But also, I think the other thing is that investors in this environment do tend to understand a bit that it's kind of up and down a little bit, so they're more used to that than thinking that everything is going to go, kind of like a straight line. But at the end of the day, you really do want to make sure you return capital.
Okay.
Yeah. So now that this carries on, so we're working on the constitution, and now we get to a point some years later where it gets to a point where I start to want to move to the next thing. So now, in 2016, I stepped down from MPESA and left the board after 10 years of service, which was really wonderful.
Is that in the law that you retire after 10 years?
No. It was a choice. It was a choice to resign. I think my time had come to an end. Okay. And I think also the other thing that had started to come into the play is that I had joined a second board. So now I had joined the ABSA board, the ABSA Bank board. And there was a lot of work to do because ABSA at that time was just on the brink of a transformation. Something that culminated actually, even though we didn't know it at the time, with a rebrand from what was Barclays Bank at the time into ABSA that it is now.
In fact, isn't that acquisition? Barclays.
Was it an acquisition?
Yeah.
Oh, it was actually the opposite. It was a divestiture. So an old shareholder left the group at the group level. And so that kind of changed the shareholding of the parent of Barclays in Kenya. Yeah, so it wasn't even at the country level.
Yes.
But it did have implications because then there was new shareholders and things had to be rearranged. Not new shareholders, but a change of allocation of shareholders. Yeah. But that was a wonderful experience.
So what they called you onto the board as? What was your role on the board?
I was a non-executive director. At that time, the board was a 50-50 board. And I was basically coming on. There was a new CEO who had just joined about a year before, who was Jeremy Awori. And after that, it was 9 years of really transforming the bank and just re-energizing it for the future.
When you say 50-50, are you talking about gender?
Yes, gender. Okay. Gender-wise, yeah. So we did a lot.
Just wait, I did not leave this thing. I want to find out what makes a company like that call you to the board. Why you? Here's where you are allowed to toot your horn, a good one.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand what are they looking for and what made you the best person in the market, because a company like ABSA doesn't make mistakes in this kind of decisions.
Yeah, you do have to be careful. And indeed, the threshold of due diligence to get on a board like that, they really turn over everything. They look, background, everything. It's very meticulous. So it's difficult. But I'm trying to think, because of course, since this time, I've been on many, many selection committees where we're looking for board members. So I'm trying to think about how to articulate what somebody would be looking for.
Okay.
So I think you really want to find somebody who has strategic thinking, a strategic mind. So one of the dynamics that happens often is that you'll find people applying to be on the board, but when you speak to them, you find that they're very inward facing or very technical. So you might be called on the board because you have financial and accounting expertise, but the purview or the lens we're asking you to bring to the board is very much of a general knowledge, strategic mindset. And when we say strategic mindset, it really means the ability to connect dots, to be able to see a certain situation in context. For example, if you give a report to the board and they tell you, it doesn't feel strategic enough, they usually they're asking that you give that information in a way that it tells a story that links it to the past, to trends, or that has implications for the future, or that gleans insights so you're able to say, this is what this data is saying. And then it informs people in a way they're able to make a decision. So many times you'll find that strategic mindset is very, very important. I do think that experience too, and experience being an entrepreneur, but especially being at the helm of an organization is important. Remember that when you're on the board, you will recruit the CEO. You're going to be a mentor and a support to the CEO. So if you're somebody who has not been in a position where you remember what we discussed about leadership, that loneliness, that ability to make decisions in ambiguity, the ability to take the pressure, and then you're coming and you're purporting to advise a CEO of a listed company which comes with unique pressures, especially a regulated one, say a bank or an insurance company. Then the question would be, are you really in a position where you're able to even understand the role? Yeah, so you really want somebody at that level. So sometimes I do hear a lot of people clamoring to be on boards, but I always, much like I said about leadership, it should be with fear and trembling. Now board positions come with a lot of liability, and this is increasing liability. So you could go to jail, you could be fined.
Okay, let's rewind this. I'm trying to think of a young person watching this. What is the role of a board?
That's a good question.
I know it's going to bring it down here, but let's start there while we go up.
Yes. So when you think of the board of directors, let's say you've created a company, and this company, of course, has shareholders. So these are the people who have put their money together, hard-earned money that they don't want to lose, right? They could have put it in something else. For some people, it's their entire retirement savings. So you put it in a company, and now you're the investor. So what you do is that you have to hire management. These are the people that day-to-day run the business, usually headed by a managing director or a CEO. Now, in order to oversee the operations of the company, you will appoint some people, some directors who form a board. And this can be anywhere from 3 to 10 people in some very large organizations. And what the board of directors does is that they create policy and they provide strategic oversight to make sure that the company is moving in the direction it's supposed to move. So you really want people who are very experienced, who have seen a lot of things. You want people of integrity, because you also don't want self-dealing. People in a position on a board, you don't want them to be in a position where they're using the company to extract value of any kind. Conflicts of interest, you have to be careful about that. But most of all, you really want people who have the best interests of the company at heart, who are not here necessarily for the money, because in many ways, you want people who have a bigger vision for the potential of the company. And often the fees that you get are a small fraction of what you would make for that time if you served it anywhere. So you're looking for a combination of the experience and expertise, a personality, the ability to mentor and support the CEO, on a board, and you're also looking for skill sets. So you want people who understand insurance, but you want diversity, because if it's an insurance company, you don't want it to be stacked with insurance people. You want some tech people to tell you this is the direction tech is going. You want some marketing people to tell you here's how we can position ourselves better. So the board basically oversees the management, and the board usually has a role in recruiting, motivating, and even separating from the CEO if things were not working out, and rewards as well. So in that way, if you want to think of it in a very simple way, the board is the boss of the CEO. And usually the CEO is also part of the board, one of the board, but the board tends to to oversee the process. They also look at the strategy. They check metrics, usually meeting every quarter at least. They monitor risk, and they make sure that the policies and procedures are being followed, and that the top management team is properly selected and motivated.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the role of a board.
And why would then somebody want to be on a board? What does that do for you by being on a board? Or why would you just want to be on a board?
Yes, I think boards, there's many reasons. I think one is that it is prestigious because basically you're getting some compensation to be at the leadership of a company, especially companies that are more prominent. And it also allows you to contribute to a company, especially strategic companies in the economy. It can be a way for you to lend your expertise, especially your accumulated expertise in a way that is very strategic and will be very satisfying. And you get to see a company move from one state to another. And knowing that you are part of that, especially if you're an assertive leader, can be very satisfying.
Nice.
So from a contribution point of view, it's great. And for people who are very seasoned, back to contribution, it's a way for you to consolidate your knowledge and to remain relevant, right? And at the top of your game by being in these boards. I think the flip side, as I had explained, is that people underestimate the challenge of being on a board, and people see it as something that you just do, whereas it comes with a lot of liability, and that liability is increasing. So the same way there's more regulation around data, there's more regulation about almost everything. Climate, now on boards, you have a lot of liability that if the company really goes bad, if it's because of negligence, because you weren't watching properly, you were not paying attention, that is legal liability. And for this reason, many directors get liability insurance as well. So it's a high stakes thing. And remember, you're not in the company day to day. So you really don't want to be in a situation where one day there's something that has gone really wrong and then your name is included in it. So you really need to be very judicious about choosing to serve on a board. You must also examine your motives, because we always say that if it's leadership, then start from, are you leading where you are, right? So practice by being on the board of your primary school, at church or an NGO in the community. Like, that's how you learn to lead. And in my case, and again, this is my individual experience, I started by serving mostly for free for several years, and working out my ideas and sharing them in the public. And then the other one is volunteering for 10 years within MPESA. So that's where I learned. Yeah, but most people will say, now I'm leaving this job straight to a board. But then, and even then, like when I joined the Centum board, the first stage was actually a subsidiary board. And then after some time, I then moved on to the main board. So
which subsidiary were you in?
So I started on the real estate side, on the Two Rivers side, and then went to the board later on as I increased my expertise in private equity. Although I've been investing alongside for a long time, for over 20 years as an angel investor, I still had to learn over time just the portfolio management level at Centum.
Wow.
Yeah. So I also tell people, and again, this is usually not in the news when people tell a story about that stepping stone, how sometimes you move forward and then you move back, and then things about how you build expertise over time. All of this is usually left. People think that, you become a...
You just arrived.
Exactly, you just land there. Exactly. It's not like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I encourage people to just take time so that when you arrive in the leadership role, you have a lot of substance to offer, as opposed to, showing up green and bewildered. You're able to really sink your teeth into the assignment and focus on the company instead of feeling the whole time that, why am I here, imposter syndrome, all of these things. If you've done the work, you show up with a lot of confidence because you've been there, done that.
Something's just entered my mind, and I want to it's going to sound very stupid, but hey, closed mouth don't get the answers. So I've just thought about it. In a time where there's been a demographic that has been misunderstood, and yet they're the biggest workforce. In a situation like that, because being in a board sounds like you need all this level of experience, these years, but what if your experience is the fact that you understand a certain demographic? I'm not sure if would that, I'm thinking of a young person asking, can I be put in this space to bring about a different perspective of this demographic? And therefore, only because I am this demographic, will you then understand this? So a Gen Z, for example.
Yeah, I've heard that argument before, but I'm not sure I completely agree because there's a number of ways to approach this. So one of them is, remember that there's many ways that you can serve to give that advisory role. There's you can come in as a consultant and advise on the strategy. You can form even a long-term advisory board that is really around the issue that you know about. But it's different from saying that I'm coming onto the board to advise and mentor the CEO when you've never been. You can see the difference, So there's many ways to get your wisdom, and it doesn't mean by any measure that we're underestimating the value that you bring. It's just that it's in a different bucket of value, right? That's the way to think about it.
Okay. Yeah. I did say it was a stupid question, but
no, it's not at all. Okay. And it's often asked.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you begin this journey with ABSA. And about what year is this?
I love the brand and I love the people. Yes, and Centum too. So that's in
you
about...
You begin them concurrently, Centum and ABSA?
Yes. I was on those two boards at the same time. It was concurrent.
Okay.